So the basis of the problem was just an unfamiliar toolset. The project was originally pitched as a mobile app. It ended up being a web app, which we were using Django for. So we were doing Python, we were doing JavaScript, we were doing HTML, none of which I had any experience or familiarity with. And a little bit of background on the app itself. It's basically within Django we have two separate apps. One of them is just a survey page where the user just inputs different things, and then we have a summary page where, based on that user input on the survey page, alerts will pop up or disappear on the summary page. So the technical problem here, I was tasked with basically designing that alert system, that communication between the two apps. So the technical problem here was that I have no familiarity with these languages or this tool set, and I had to create a way for these two apps to communicate. I had to create some kind of a shared data source or some kind of a communication channel, and I didn't really know where to start. So my first step was research. I wanted to learn how to write in these languages to begin with, and then I actually downloaded a Udemy course to learn a bit about just web development in general, and kind of learn some tips and techniques. And then after that, it was really just trial and error. I kind of had to just jump in, and at some point you just have to kind of just start and see what works. So my first go at it was Ajax, which seemed to be most people's recommendation based on, Googling and watching videos and so on and so forth, but I had no knowledge of HTTP or, server-based programming in general, so Ajax was a little hard for me to get working properly, so that did not work out. And then finally I discovered web-based storage, so I eventually started using local storage as basically a temporary database. So the survey app would essentially read and write to the local storage, and then the summary page would read from the local storage, and based on the value it read, an alert would either pop up or disappear. So overall, I think the results were pretty good. I mean, I ended up building a pretty decent alert system. I ended up being the one to basically design the entire thing and build the entire thing, and it worked pretty well, and it was fast, and it was what we needed. I learned a ton. I mean, I learned so much about just writing in these three languages, developing in these three languages, web-based development, web-based storage. I learned a little bit about servers. I mean, I learned a ton. And then, I was able to build a really solid foundation for my other teammates. Not all of them were familiar with any of these things either, so I was basically able to go out and write a really big code base that was well documented and comprehensive, and they were basically able to go through it and say, oh, hey, this is how Liz did this, so maybe I can do it that way when I do it. So I was able to help my team in that regard. If I could go back and do it again, I think the first thing I would do is do a little bit more research before I began my trial and error phase. I think I felt a little bit of pressure to just start going because our project had a slow start. It was a little bit behind based on, outside conflicts, but I think I felt a little bit pressure to just start, so I cut my research time a little short. I think I also would have waited for the database to have been in place before I started the alert system, or at least communicated that to my teammates who were working on the database. I think if the database had been in place first, we wouldn't have had to rework the code once we put the database in place. And then finally, I think, to be completely honest, I would go back and I would work harder at getting Ajax to work, because now that we're towards the end of the project, we have our database fully implemented, we're trying to rework the code to communicate with Ajax. So now that we have the database, we're using Ajax to communicate from one app to the other, and it would have been a lot easier if I had done that to begin with and we didn't have to rework all of the code and rewrite all of the code. So yeah, that about sums it up, and thanks for listening.